All right. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shauna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, got some new stuff for you. I'm dangerous when I read a book, girl. I'm
Yeah.
dangerous. I'm dangerous. But how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Awesome.
Sweltering heat here, and I got my dogs a little paddling pool because I'm that kind of
Oh,
person. But guess who ended up sitting in said paddling pool today? Not the dogs.
no way.
Dude,
They
it's
sit
hot.
on the
It's hot. I just try like, come on, join me. They're like, no.
Look, hey, I don't blame you. Too hot. Too hot. I mean, it now we did a little switcheroo with you all, I guess, then because we are now back down to 70-ish,
Oh,
74,
okay.
77. But that's because we had like torrential rain a couple nights ago, and so it got cool. And so right now it's comfortable, but yeah, those we went for almost 2 months with nothing but 90 something. So we need
Yeah.
a little break. You know,
Yeah.
when you wake
Well,
up in the morning and you look at your windows, like I run the air, which wasn't that low, but you look out your windows and all your windows are steamy because it's just that hot and humid outside. That's been like
I
the
don't,
last two
yeah, we don't
weeks.
have that. We don't have the humidity. So I don't get that. But
Ugh,
it is,
sucks.
78 by like 8 a.m. or something. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes, 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 exactly. So, all right. Well, let's get into this week's episode. Lisa, I have to tell you, let's jump into the word of the week here.
Hmm.
So I am definite that you and our memory is fading just a touch
Yep.
because
Yep.
we talk about this word all the time when it comes to politics, when it comes to identity, all those different things. But I don't think we've ever defined it in such a way that people can become agile with the word and use it in lots of different
Hmm.
places and spaces. But our word of the week is ideology. Ideology. And we've talked about gender ideology on this podcast. We've talked about political ideology ad nauseum on this podcast, but I don't think we ever just went down to the fundamental building block, which
Hmm.
is when you think about an ideology, it is a system of ideas or ideals, IDEALS, ideas or ideals, especially those that form the basis of certain policy, theory,
Hmm.
political theory, economic theory. You have some ideas or ideals to strive for, and then they become fundamental to the ways in which you really function. And so, Lisa, if I had to kind of boil this down into, some words to describe ideology without giving a long definition, what's your value set? What's
Hmm.
important to you? What's a priority to you? And usually, whatever your ideology is, it's like this whole building that's built upon the scaffolding of what's important to you. So
Hmm.
if, financial freedom is important to you, then you're probably going to think of economic or political theory in such a way that financial freedom is the outcome or the ideal of what you want. And
Hmm.
so I think what's interesting, Lisa, is that as much as we've talked about politics, the economy, lots of different angles of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have talked about the bills and the laws and the structure that are the outcome without always necessarily going down to the
Right.
root of
Right.
why do people build these policies and laws and
Hmm.
propose bills that are going in this direction. It's like, oh, okay, now I know what's important to me clearly is not important to you, so how in the world did we get here? And I think, unfortunately, we're becoming more and more frayed in our ideologies. It's not going to be binary. It's not going to be two or three, even though we have a mostly dual political system in this country. I would suggest that our ideologies, plural, are so frayed now that it's hard to find unity anywhere unless you're intentionally searching for it. So that's my take on ideology. But Lisa, what's
Hmm.
kind of the
Hmm.
first things you think about when you hear ideology? Probably politics, given your formal education and background. But
Yeah. Yep.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
definitely politics. I mean, I asked the students in the public policy class I teach what is ideology and get a lot of blank stares.
Oh,
Um,
uh-huh.
so this is
Huh.
I don't think a lot of people really understand or think about what it is. So it was a good idea of you to
Mm,
to share this. And I think that I would actually say rather than frayed, I think our I think ideology is becoming more separated. So like historically, I think
Oh.
that it was probably more of like, if you think about a rope and you pull that rope apart and it's lots of threads, right? And there's
Mm-hmm.
overlap across those threads.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think now it's more like there's just two, right? Like people
Ah.
are more entrenched ideologically and further apart. And so there's less opportunity for overlap. I don't
Mm-hmm.
actually think that I don't think that's actually true. I
Mm-hmm.
think the politicization of ideology
Oh,
has created
yes.
that reality. But I think if people were actually honest and authentic and talked seriously about policy solution and ideas and the ways in
Mm.
which we can make the United States a better place for a larger group of people, I think that overlap would be there. But I think our political system has disallowed that kind of conversation, right? Like,
Mm.
you're for it, Shauna, so I must be against it, right? Um,
Right. 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 Right.
even
Right.
if even if that's not true, and I think that's why we see so many high levels of hypocrisy, where
Ugh.
people, 9 months ago have said blank, and then now say
Right.
180 degrees the opposite,
Right.
right? And
Right.
it's highly unlikely they've changed their ideological position about a policy in
Yeah.
that short time frame, right? They're just being
Yeah.
pushed into it. And
Yeah.
I'm reading a book now. I would recommend this readers. It's called the 10 Years War, and it's by Jonathan Cohn, and it's about the Affordable Care Act. So it takes you from 2008 to 2018. So it's before the Affordable Care Act, the passage,
Mm-hmm.
and then the ongoing unresolved fight to kind of deconstruct, pull apart, repeal the Affordable Care Act. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so interesting because obviously we're now in 2025, so that we're 7 years on from the end of when the book finishes, and the ways in which ideology has pre-Trump, right? Like this ideological separation
Mm.
was occurring long before Trump, and how it manifested in the healthcare debate was
Yes.
essentially, right, like, I don't believe, Shauna, you deserve healthcare.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I don't care if repealing the Affordable Care Act is going to strip healthcare from 25 million people,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
Like,
That's right.
that is not something that everyone
Mm-hmm.
gets to have. And so it's
Right.
just really interesting that you brought
Yes.
up ideology today when I was just listening to it, and this kind of was just
Mm-hmm.
landing
Mm-hmm.
on me, right? And
Yeah.
so that, yeah. So anyway,
Absolutely. Well, we've seen it. I know this is not exactly a whole phase, but just one thing that clicked in my brain about ideology too is something we've talked about on this podcast around just empathy in general.
yeah.
Like, so, and I would suggest, for example, this is one of many ideologies, is that we probably, Lisa, come from the ideology that empathy is an asset and a strength.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas ideology of lots of Republicans, specifically, who Republicans, would say that their ideology is empathy is a very clear weakness, and we want to purge
Mm-hmm.
ourselves and our approaches from such empathy, right? That's very fundamental. I care that people have health care. Well, their ideology may be I don't care that people have
Yeah.
health care. And so our decision making stems from those two very different ideologies. Or I believe people should have health care pending XYZ. That's another
Mm-hmm.
ideology. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think to our point here is that I would just strongly encourage people to stop and reflect on what
Yeah.
is your ideology,
Yeah. a
because
hundred
I
percent.
don't want folks led astray with, okay, well, here's the bill that's been proposed, or, you know, and that to me is asking people to focus on one very small branch of many deep roots, and the roots are the
Mm-hmm.
ideology. If
Yeah.
you don't examine your own, then you're sure to be led astray into, oh, well, I thought this was going to happen as a result. Well, it wasn't, because your ideology wasn't the same and you didn't take
Yeah.
time to look at it.
Yeah. Agreed.
So Anyhow, ideology. We backtracked a little bit to take a few steps forward on that one, but hopefully
Mhm.
you can't unsee ideology anymore. You'll be able to see it all around you from henceforth after this conversation. All right, so let's get into phase one. Phase one. And I have to say, like I said, Lisa, I am dangerous when I have been with my nose in them books, okay? Because I was very fortunate to have a good friend of mine send me a book about the topic of Black August, and it just fell perfectly in this time frame for us to have a conversation about because I felt kind of like the same way I felt when I discovered and studied Juneteenth, right? As a
Mhm.
Black person, non-Black people think that Black people know everything about our history, and we don't. We know a lot about it, and we're constantly discovering it. And Lisa, you are a very logical thinker. You would probably say, of course, you don't know everything about your history because it's been systemically removed from this country. So, how would
That's
you ever know everything about your own
that's
history?
exactly what I was thinking. You're yeah.
I know you. We mind melded. We mind melded, but we don't. And so I love these moments where I have enough of my own cultural humility to say I don't know everything about my own history. And so this was an awesome opportunity, just like Juneteenth, to learn more about yet another time in
Mhm.
the calendar where I can stop and reflect on my own history. And so with that, this is now Black August, and it is a month of commemoration, but also focus on resistance tradition. And for Black folks, and this is this is stemming back, Lisa, to that episode when we talked about, all right, Black people, but especially Black women, we tired. We're going to sit down somewhere while y'all
Mhm.
fight the good fight.
Mhm.
That is still true, I would say. But at the same time, it's one thing to sit down when you've done a couple of marches and you've made a couple of posters and now you're going to sit down. It's
Mhm.
another thing when generationally you've been in this fight since before you were born and then you go sit down, right? And so Black August allows us to take a month to think about Black freedom fighters, political prisoners in particular, those who died while incarcerated or in any type of struggle for Black liberation, right? And so it was so cool as I was reading this because I felt like I had seen glimmers of this movement, but I hadn't seen it pulled all together into a way to really have a personal and household response to all of this rich history of resistance, right? So this started back in the California prison system back in the 70s with the deaths of two individuals that were incarcerated at the time. George Jackson, he was only 13 years old, who died incarcerated in 71, and then Jonathan Jackson, who also died while incarcerated in 1970. And that's just a couple of many that happened during the month of August over many years. But they are part of decades, hundreds of years actually, of incarceration, political prisoners, those that mounted very strategic rebellion in such a way that many lost their lives. And we know this. So, going back to Nat Turner, going back to Harriet Tubman, who's a Marylander, of course, I have to say, um, Gabriel Prosser and Gabriel's rebellion in particular. That's one that I had kind of heard of because he was in Virginia. He was in Henrico County down in Richmond. Frederick Douglass, of course, which is a Marylander. Katari Galden. That one is an interesting story, Lisa, because Katari Galden was already doing a lot of work around prison reform and Black liberation at the time. He was simply playing a game of basketball while imprisoned and had a hard shove that pushed him into a metal fence, and then he fell really hard to the ground and hit his head. And the guards and the wardens were literally moving other prisoners out one by one, and it took them so long that by the time they got to Qatari, he had already bled out and passed away right there on the
Oh
spot.
my goodness.
And so he was a revolutionary while confined, but that lack of medical care, which is not uncommon, unfortunately, was why he died. And so we've got a laundry list of folks. And so it's really important, especially as we think about um, so many folks that have tried to do really good work around um, recidivism in particular, all of this to slow down and think about what it means as far as most Black people, Black men in particular, being incarcerated and just taking some intentional time to reflect. And so for Black August, most folks are called to slow down and reflect. If you are into fasting, fasting for a certain period of time, physical training, political education, and resistance overall in such a way that we commemorate all those lives lost, years lost in prison systems, and really reflect on how we want to see a different world moving forward. And so given that, Lisa, I feel like I saw glimmers around all of these topics, but for one book and one topic to bring it all together, it does give you some direction. And so I appreciated that a friend of mine sent me this book to educate me on this because I literally had never heard of this until about 2 weeks ago, Lisa. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
pretty cool, separate and apart from Black History Month, separate and apart from Kwanzaa. But like I've always said, I mean, 365 Black anyway. Why aren't we talking about these topics anyway? It gives a perfect opportunity in the month of August to slow down and think within our community around all of that history, including the stories we don't know and haven't heard.
So it's specifically related to incarcerated people, the prison
Mm-hmm.
system, mass
Mm-hmm.
incarcerated. So it's not, so that's
Mm-hmm.
what makes it distinct from Black history, is that there's a very specific thrust to Black
Yeah.
August around this particular topic.
Absolutely. And the going back into the history of it into the 70s, when you look at the numbers between 77, 79 or so, this started in California where the prison population had increased by hundreds of, I mean, it was just ridiculous how it had exponentially grown. And so it was opportunity to focus and say, wait a minute, what's going on? And so when you think about prison population increasing at the same time, within that prison population, obviously that means shootings and woundings were happening more often. And then on top of that, very noteworthy activists that, of course, the Black communities felt like they shouldn't have been imprisoned in the first place, and now they're dying in custody. That's a different matter entirely. And so I appreciate the fact that it's setting aside a month to focus on a particular issue in the Black community because there are so many to think about.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, we have a lot to choose from,
You
for
do.
good or for bad. We have a lot to think about. I mean, when I think about Black History Month, I'm thinking about major accomplishments and Black excellence.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when I think about this, I'm thinking, oh, this is really important and almost a plague within the Black community. So, yeah, we need to give this some attention.
But in some ways, this is still an honoring of Black excellence, right? Because you're talking about people who have given their lives
Hmm.
to illuminate the ways in which the carceral system is racist and um,
Hmm.
treats incarcerated people, justice involved people, very poorly, to your healthcare point.
Hmm.
And the ways in which you are released from prison and you have a felony, at least, right, that limits your suffrage, that limits your
Yeah.
ability to get employment, to have housing, right? There's all these
Hmm.
connected
Yes.
pieces to it, but you've got
Yes.
these shining lights of folks who are not letting that oppressive system, they're not buckling under it, right? Which you could understand why someone might, because it's a whole lot of pressure, right?
Hmm.
So I do think that I think there's something important there. The names that you listed off, right, in terms
Hmm.
of folks who have made a really strong mark on this issue. And so
Yeah.
the August piece because of those two young men you mentioned at the beginning that died in prison in August.
Yes, they both died in August. But when you looked at, because like I mentioned to you earlier before we started recording, I am just barely midway through
Okay.
reading what I have currently. But when I looked back at people much smarter than myself that are true historians, African American
Mhm.
historians, Black historians that actually almost triangulated the data on what has happened in August. The laundry list of things that happened in August is ridiculous. I mean, and again, these are all touch points of Black history that I knew, but not thinking about, oh my goodness, all of these happened in August. I wonder why that's the case. I wonder if it's because, when it's warmer weather, people protest outside more, or if there's, what
Yeah.
exactly is happening. I'm not sure with the August piece, but thinking about both of those assassinations that happened, George Jackson and Jonathan as well, both of those at the same time. 1619, and specifically the kidnapping, happened in August. In particular, we arrived to British North America at that time in August. Nat Turner's rebellion happened in August in 1830, 31. So Nat Turner specifically. And then other modern day names of folks that also lost their lives also happened in August. Black men in
Mm.
particular, Michael Brown, John Crawford. I mean, and so I'm wondering, I'm still trying to figure out what is it about August that seems to overwhelmingly attract such resistance, pain, loss of life. I'm not sure why it's all coalescing around August, but that's really a nuance that I hadn't thought of before. And now, to your other point too, you made me think about it's I believe you're right that yes, it is Black excellence. And at the same time, Black excellence just existing versus Black excellence rising up in the face of resistance is a nuance,
Mhm.
right? So like
Okay. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
one thing, like if let's say it's one thing that I'm just making up something, y'all forgive me, but let's say Shauna is just an incredible inventor, a Black inventor, and I create a boat that's waterproof that can get me across the Atlantic Ocean.
Mhm.
Nobody's bothering me. I wanted to, I created this because I saw a vision for something that could work. That's
Yeah.
one thing versus doing this because I'm trying to escape something or I'm trying to go
Mhm.
get my family and bring them back to someplace safe. I'm doing the same thing, but the context of resistance is
Yeah. Okay.
powerful to me.
Yeah.
Um, and thinking about because I think that's the constant. Lisa, give me a word other than blind spot. It's the oblivion. I guess it could be like the white oblivion that, oh, well, I knew that Shauna was a hard worker, but it's something different if Shauna's a hard worker and she had these 10 things working against her and she was still successful. And I think white oblivion sometimes, oftentimes, isn't aware of some of the resistance, much less all of the resistance. So it's one thing to be excellent in just in and of yourself. It's another thing to be excellent in the face of foolishness. Like if Shauna makes straight A's right now in 2025, that's completely different than Shauna being a little girl making straight A's while Brown versus Board of Education is going on and police have to escort me to a classroom. Both excellent, but the context is messed up.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess I would in it the yeah, the context is different, but the barriers are still there, right? So there's not really an example of you building a boat or getting straight A's where you're not surrounded in one way or another with systems, policies, people that
Mm.
are not supportive of your excellence and your success.
Mm-hmm.
It just looks different in 2025 than what it did in 1954, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
And not only not supportive, intentionally actively
yeah,
working against my
yeah,
excellence.
yeah, sabotaging, yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yes,
So that's
sabotaging.
yeah,
Yes.
so that's like always there, and so that white oblivion that you just talked about is a refusal to see that, right? A refusal to acknowledge that that is always
Mm-hmm.
operating in the background.
Always. Always.
Um,
Always. Yes. Yes.
yeah, which is why this whole attack on DEI is so problematic. Which
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the anti DEI people, DEI is illegal crew would have something to say about Black August, right? Uh, I can
Mm-hmm.
only imagine. I can only imagine.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Um, it's really fascinating. I would love to hear more about this once you've finished the book. I'm also really curious about the August thing, and how August really kind of lines up if you think about all of, like, if you look at every month and see the degree to which these
Yes.
people and events are happening, and is August really a standout? And then
Mm-hmm.
if
Mm-hmm.
so, like, why? Like, that makes me a bit nervous about
Yes.
August as a month, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
what
Uh-huh.
is happening? What is going on in the universe that makes August this kind of like
Mm-hmm.
month that has all of these things, good and bad, happening in particular in
Mm.
relation to incarceration? The other thing I will just say before
Yes.
we wrap up here is it's very interesting to me that this occurred in the 70s,
Mm.
because the 1994 crime bill is really kind of the um, universally agreed upon time when mass incarceration took off and you started to really see
Yes.
those discrepancies.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's not that it wasn't happening before, but it just like went into overdrive right after
Yes. Yes.
1994. And so in some ways it's curious that this grew out of the 1970s and not the 1990s.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, and my question becomes too is again, just because it's new to Shauna does not mean it's new to everyone. I wonder if it had been observed from the 70s to through and beyond the 90s, like you mentioned, because it could have possibly been, and I'm just becoming aware. But yeah, I think it's fascinating. And I would also love to make or at least think about the connection with Brian Stevenson's more recent work around, being a public interest lawyer, being the founder of Equal Justice Initiative, and focusing on that, even though he's in a different area. I believe he's in Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. But all of these glimmers connect when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
this type of resistance. And so, now look, if I find out that Brian Stevenson started EJI in August, I might just fall out of this chair right now. Like,
Okay.
why are the stars aligning? I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, so I have a factoid for you. I just looked it up. So that 1994 crime bill, um, so a version passed the House in November, and
Hmm.
then later in November, a version passed the Senate. And then when you have two inconsistent versions, there has to be a
Hmm.
conference committee. And so that conference committee agreement about what the final bill would be prior to Bill Clinton signing it was August.
No, no, no. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
Clinton signed it September 13th, but I think it actually got passed
Passed
out of
in
both
August.
because that conference thing it's the 21st and the 25th of August. Yeah.
See, oh Lord. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
That's like, okay, this is almost getting eerie now. So, but I
Mm-hmm.
think it's crucial. I think, and part of me, and again, I'm always wondering even about what the body and the psyche of Black people, what we know, because Lisa, you know this for a fact, even for the amount of time that you've known me. I have always said I need to slow down in August. I need to relax, and I need to step away from the formal work, reflect, read, chill out, spend time
Yes.
with family. I've
Yes.
always, and I
Yep.
only
Yep.
thought about that because it is a lull right before, school year and other things, but
Mm-hmm.
August just always seemed to be the perfect
Mm-hmm.
timing in my personal calendar. And so now it has me even reflecting on myself. This is one of those discoveries, like let's say you're learning about your lineage or your genealogy or what have you, and you're like, oh my God, that's why I've been doing it all these years. Maybe it was passed down, through family structures, and I didn't
Yeah.
even realize I was doing it for that reason. I don't know yet. I'm still figuring it out here.
Yeah.
But wow, that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty impressive there that that all coalesces around August. So don't be thinking about
Yeah.
August the same anymore, y'all.
No, no, I
It
think we're
it
going to start seeing things with August, and it's going to be like, you can't unsee it now that you've talked about it and kind of introduced it.
Yes, yes, exactly. So anyway, I'm going to
Mhm.
keep reading, y'all. I will circle back when I know more and know better about my own background and history, but I wanted to at least get the conversation started because this is the right time. And for those that are interested, I will certainly drop some more links around the topic of Black August. But so grateful I have good friends that are, look, they are nerds just like us, Lisa. I mean, they
Yep,
got stacks
love
of
it,
books everywhere. I love it, love it. So,
love it.
oh, all right. Well, take us into phase two.
Okay, so a couple of things happened. I watched a PBS NewsHour piece that was an interview with the FCC president, chair, head, I forget exactly what the moniker is. And you sent me an email that came out from Dan Rather's Substack. And Dan Rather is a journalist, CBS, right? Wasn't he a CBS news anchor? Yeah. So, I mean, I know his name is like very synonymous with the evening news, but I didn't grow up with him. So, there, lots of white men do that. So I get them all mixed up. But this person, so anyway, so these two things happened and I wanted to talk about it. So, as you all know, CBS had this agreement with the Trump administration over 60 Minutes for an editorial decision they made around a Kamala Harris interview that was a totally legitimate decision. There was absolutely nothing to this lawsuit, but they settled because they wanted to get the parent company Paramount wanted a merger with Skydance that has subsequently been approved by the FCC. Shocker, right? So as part of that agreement, I'm going to quote here. I went back and watched the clip from PBS NewsHour. So the FCC chairman, that's what it is, chairman, said that CBS has agreed to bring more fact-based, objective, unbiased reporting to their newsrooms as part of this agreement. And so this coupled with a piece from Dan Rather's newsletter that said, Paramount has promised that news and entertainment programming embodies a diversity of viewpoints across the political and ideological spectrum. There's that ideology word, while also eliminating all diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And then the editorializing is, well, hard to do both unless you really mean is embodying only quote unquote conservative parentheses red Trump's viewpoints, right? And it made me think of this Stephen Colbert. So Stephen Colbert is a comedian. He currently hosts The Late Show, which has also been canceled, like as of next year. And there's a lot of speculation as why that is, because he is a big critic of Trump. But before he took on that role, he had a show called The Colbert Report on Comedy Central that followed The Daily Show. And it was a satirical show. And he kind of embodied this like caricature of a right-wing conservative news pundit. It's quite prescient, actually, in 2025, thinking about the way that he parodied these perspectives. But one of the things that he said was, reality has a liberal bias, right? So I just connected all these threads in my head in the sense that this belief that mainstream or legacy media has a liberal bias when they are, in fact, generally just reporting facts, right? But those facts are unfavorable to right-wing extremists, including the current administration. Therefore, it must be a liberal bias, right? So this idea that CBS is going to bring more fact-based, objective, unbiased reporting to their newsrooms actually means, to Dan Rather's point, that they're going to now have to tilt or shift their reporting rightward. So they're actually going to come off of the center, perhaps center left, and they're going to move to the right. So they're not even going to tip center right, they're going to move to the right, because that is the only way, or that they could experience this labeling as unbiased, right? And during this interview, and I will link this interview, and Jeff Bennett was doing the interview, and he's usually pretty good, but this whole like 12 or 15-minute interview, when they're talking about CBS and the liberal bias in media, blah, 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 like he doesn't once bring up the fact that, well, Fox News, the One American News Network, I think it is, right? Like they are extraordinarily single-sided in their journalism and the ways in which they present information, but they're not being investigated by the FCC. They're not being told that to meet the public interest mandate, they have to have a diversity of opinions and a diversity of ideological positions, right? Because that bias is acceptable, right? Like, and so I was like kind of screaming at the television, like, bring it up, bring it up, bring it up. And he didn't. So I was a bit frustrated there. But so anyway, so the Dan Rather's newsletter goes on to say, According to the Washington Post, which tracked Trump's lack of truthfulness during his first term, he lied an average of 21 times a day for 4 years, totaling
Good God.
30,573 false and misleading claims. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Historians have called him a serial liar. And
Mm-hmm.
so the argument that CBS and other legacy media outlets have a left-leaning bias and therefore need monitoring falls apart quickly when you realize the far right doesn't want unbiased reporting. They want Trump's version of the story and his version of the truth. To
Mm-hmm.
them, it simply can't be negative and true, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
That's right.
any
That's right.
reporting that is
That's right.
negative can't also be true, which goes back to Stephen Colbert's 2006 joke comment, reality has a liberal bias, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, you know, so that is all
Yeah.
happening. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking about this.
Yeah.
And then a few weeks ago, the jobs numbers come out for Q2.
Yes. Now you want to fire people for telling the truth on
And
the numbers with employment.
yes, the Bureau of Labor
Ah,
Statistics executive director is then fired
for
because
telling the truth.
right, for telling the truth, right? Because reality has a liberal bias. Therefore, she must have cooked the books because the jobs numbers don't match up with what he, in his imagination, believes that they should be based on his economic policy. He doesn't know shit about economic policy. Like, I actually think I know more about economic
I
policy
know you do.
than him,
I know
having
you do.
read stuff about it, right? Like, he
Shoot,
doesn't
I
read anything.
I know more than he knows, and I know less than half what you know. What are you talking about? Yes.
So yeah, so
Uh,
so again, like, it's just like they're just the elimination of non-partisan centrist truth
mm-hmm,
tellers. And
mm-hmm.
the legacy media doesn't always get it right. Clearly, PBS, I think, missed an opportunity there to call out the hypocrisy. And they don't always get it right, but to say that because the reporting doesn't put him and his administration and his policies in a favorable light, it's therefore untrue. This
Yes.
is the slippery slope. Like, this is authoritarianism.
Oh, of
And
course.
then don't
Yes.
even get me started on Colombia and the fact that they have this now ideological monitor,
Ugh.
right?
Ugh.
Um,
Ugh. Yes. Yes. Yes.
so
Yes.
anyway, that was a little bit of a rant. Sorry, but I'm wondering
No.
what your reaction is, what your thoughts are. You obviously saw that email and forwarded
Yes.
it
I.
to me because it
Yeah.
piqued your interest. So,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and this goes back to some of the conversation that we've had before around the the disillusion around the truth. No, no, let me go back. The disillusion that positivity has to be the truth, or that it even has to be a positive or negative. So, for
mhm.
example, Lisa, how many times have we talked about this in other places and spaces and other episodes where we've said, if we don't talk about the quote unquote negative or uncomfortable, it gets excluded.
Yeah.
And there are certain topics that can never be talked about in a positive way. For
Mhm.
example, slavery. For
Right.
example, kidnapping. I mean, on and on and on. There are certain topics that will never be the fuzzy feel good topics. And so, again, if we don't make specifically white folks, but let's go into white male MAGA Republican folks. If they don't feel comfortable with it, then
Mhm.
it's not going to be discussed. And
Yeah.
that's where we end up slowly but surely liposuctioning away the
Mhm.
liberal truth, and I'm using liberal loosely, liberal truth meaning the fullest truth that we can have, because any
Mhm.
historian will say, as we know better, we do better. So history is never full until we know as many angles as humanly possible.
Right.
But because it's not a positive angle, it gets liposuctioned out, and then we don't use it anymore. We don't tell it anymore, and then it gets lost in history.
Mhm.
And that's the goal, for certain things to get lost in history. Like prime example with what we were just talking about in the first phase is that that's also the slippery slope of, oh, let's make sure that we systemically exclude certain stories And so then they don't exist.
Yeah,
But then
yeah.
when they get reintroduced into history, that becomes problematic. That becomes disruptive. That becomes anti-American because we're introducing the fuller truth, history, data, information that happens to make other people feel uncomfortable.
Hmm.
No, I don't like necessarily talking about the horrors that our Native American siblings had, but I think we should talk about it as much as possible. And I'm okay sitting in my discomfort because what makes me feel good is not the only angle of the story. And for these particular groups, it's not even the reality for anybody else other than them.
Yeah.
So it's exhausting because going back to, what Stephen Colbert said about reality has a liberal bias, let's get down to the root language of liberality. Liberality means a wide view of the
Hmm.
same experiences. Conservative means a narrow view of the same experiences. So, of course, even if you don't have a political agenda connected to it, liberal means we're going to take in all of the all of the perceptions of the same experience and put it together to find some sort of commonality. That's not what these folks want. They want the most narrow view
Yeah.
of the experience, and particularly the most narrow view of the experience that makes them feel good about it.
Hmm.
And if you're not willing to tell that narrow view, then you have no place, space, and definitely no power in this administration. Especially when you're talking about the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it's like, okay, so people are literally getting fired for telling the truth because the truth does not align with white male MAGA comfort. Got it.
Yeah. I mean,
And so
we
I
did
don't think
that.
it's a
We did
slippery
it
slope anymore. I think it's a greased
like,
lightning slope that we are
yeah,
all, I mean, it was a slippery slope the first term, his first term.
right.
Now it is I mean, we are fast forwarding through because look at how much has been, like you said, how much has been excluded even in this 6, 7 months now.
Yeah, and we did that discussion of the national parks and the national historic societies,
Yes.
and then I had sent you that article. That the people who are employed in at national parks are they're actually submitting shit to this
Mm-hmm.
email address or whatever, right? And it's just, and so all of these things are, that little sign that we talked about, like there's
Yes.
actually
Yes.
staff members, employees that
Mm-hmm.
are doing it, one, because they're supportive, but two, because I think they're fearful that if they don't, then their job might be at risk, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so this piece that we are no longer, like, that reality is an interpretation. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
these little things like the Paramount CBS thing, the Bureau of Labor Statistics,
Mm-hmm.
the parks and the National Historic Sites, the
Mm-hmm.
FCC, Trump saying that he is the most supportive free speech president in the history of the world, which is like
He is. He
empirically
is. He
not true.
is. He is for the speech that agrees with him.
Right. So therefore he's not, right? Like
Exactly.
you wouldn't be making
Uh,
DEI illegal, which I still don't believe you could actually do, and there is not a law against it, right? Like you can't make DEI illegal. If you were
mhm,
genuinely 110% in for free speech, then that wouldn't even be a thing that you could do. But I
mhm.
think these little things that are happening, and I'm not sure that even people, I think so many people are like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like they're kind of paying attention. They're not really, their head is down, they're getting on with it, right? But which then limits our ability to connect the dots.
Yes, 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 yes.
And so not seeing that pattern that I think Dan Rather was trying to highlight in his Substack email
Mhm, mhm.
around the ways in which our speech is being limited and truth fact-based journalism is being cast as liberal. And you're so right to bring up that definition, because liberal as a kind of slur, right,
Yes.
didn't exist even 20, 25 years ago. And the United States was founded, liberalism was one of the founding ideological theories upon which the United States was founded, right? So it's just funny, but liberal
Yeah.
meaning, he puts salt liberally on his French fries, right? right? Like, so like it does, it means
Right,
a
right,
lot
right.
more, right? Like, so I think
Yes.
that's a really important definitional point. Yeah.
It is. It is. And so, before we, hang the slur terms on, like, even for example, I would even go back to, again, correct me if I'm completely off on this, Lisa, but I would even go back to kind of Reaganish, pre-Reaganish thought where even at that time, I'm like, oh, even conservative didn't mean what it means now. Even
No,
then, it
no.
wasn't used like a slur the way it is now, even for conservative. So I don't want to just go in our direction in a blue-ish direction. I want to go in all directions here. I'm trying to be liberal talking about conservatism. The
Yeah.
cons the use of the language becoming a slur is not its actual, but let me stop right there. I think that's the point, though.
Mm.
Again, the ongoing hijacking of language to make it
Yeah.
seem like it's one thing when it's actually another is being made into an art form by this daggone administration.
Hmm.
Liberal, conservative, DEI, fiscal responsibility, Doge, all of these different terms, acronyms, perspectives that are literally hijacked, and what's this is how we do it, Lisa. This has become the formula here. We take a word that has been long defined one way, studied one way,
Hmm.
applied one way for decades. We hijack it, turn that word into a villainized term. We
Hmm.
don't deeply define it. We don't deeply understand it. We run away with the sound bite, inaccurate version, and at the same time, continue to silence experts. And that's how you run away with language ideologies and convince people to do one thing when it's actually tearing down things. They think they're building up things when they're actually tearing down with the other. So that's how you hijack it. Amplify the shallow versions of things, silence the deep expertise, and that's how you get very effed up ideology. That's what it
Yeah,
feels like.
actually, and that to just to bring us full circle, that brings me back to this book, The 10 Years War, because that's exactly what happened,
Mm,
around the Affordable
okay.
Care Act and death panels, which was not actually a thing. And it wasn't, and the lack of, like, the weakness in our system to be able to fight that, right? Because
Yes,
as the
yes,
book explained, like, for those of you digging back
yes.
into the
Mhm.
recesses here, the death panels, like, I'm not even sure where that, it's not even clear how panel came to be attached to it, because what it was
Hmm.
that they wanted to um, compensate doctors for having conversations with patients about end of life planning, like living wills and things like that, because the concern was that if doctors are not able to bill for that time, then they don't spend time with patients talking about it. And so then patients are left on their own to figure
To
out what a
figure it
living
out.
will is and what do I need to consider.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
um, that got twisted and transformed into this death panel thing, right?
That's
It's
right.
just not even true. And so that was then, and this is now, and we are like, 60 times worse, to your point,
Hmm.
around kind of the hijacking and the redefining and the lies. I mean, 30,500 lies in Trump's first term. I can only imagine where we're at 6, 7 months in now. But that's
Yeah.
the thing, right? Like, oh, I can lie through my teeth as long as those lies forward a position that is supportive of the far right. But I can't
And
tell the truth because that's not supportive.
and I still suggest I am very much an accountability person. The lack of courage that allows
Yeah,
that to
yeah,
happen.
yes. There's a lack of massive
That's
lack
what
of courage.
bothers me. Like there was one gentleman, I can't remember where he was. Um, but he So 45, 47 went up to the podium, said some bullshit, and then the expert came right behind him and said, actually, it's this. The the amount of courage that it takes to do that is not happening from my perspective because people are afraid. People
Yeah.
don't have a lot of courage around it, and so they're not willing to tell the truth. So what happens is either they're afraid to confront the lie publicly, or they just resign and say, "Hey, it's not worth uh it's not worth the job. It's not worth my life being in danger. It's not worth his supporters threatening me and my family, and so I have to move on." And I do understand that particular point too. If I were
Mhm.
let's say a legislator that did not have children and, maybe I'm just on my own, do my thing. Catch me 20 years ago, I'm feeling a Jasmine Crockett type atmosphere.
Mhm.
Having so many people I'm responsible for now, I'd probably be one of the people that resigned. Yes, I would tell the truth, but I would tell the truth as I'm walking out the door because I know you're going to fire my ass and I don't have time for your followers to be threatening me and my kids.
Yeah.
That's literally where we are in this country right now. If enough people had courage around it, then it would be something different. But we're just seeing glimmers of courage here and there, and that's about it. And so that
Yeah.
allows him, that gives him, a 4-lane highway to continue to push the lies that go unchecked.
Yeah. And then if you're in an echo chamber, you're only listening to either you're listening to a single news source, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, you're also not getting a liberal in the
That's
traditional
right.
sense,
That's right.
diversity of perspectives and opinions to really kind of then work your way through. But um,
Hmm. Hmm.
I
That's right.
don't we've talked at and around this before, but I just was struck by the reading the Substack you sent me on the heels of seeing this PBS interview. So I
Hmm.
just thought it was valuable. And I do think just funny, right?
Yeah.
Nearly 20 years ago, Stephen Colbert made that joke. Reality has a liberal bias. And I'm like, well, holy shit.
Here we are.
Here
Here
we are.
we are.
Mhm.
Oh goodness. Well, look, he couldn't have been more right. At least a quick funny. I started following Dan Rather. This was when I was still on what was then Twitter, and I would see Dan Rather post articles from this mysterious Substack, and I would just go out there. He was literally the only person I was reading stuff from on Substack. So I didn't even know what Substack was. I just knew I wanted to read what Dan Rather was saying. And so I just continued to stay subscribed, and he's just hitting it out the ballpark. Almost every article, it's something else that we could rip off of. So,
Yeah.
oh, all
Yeah.
right. Well, there you have it, y'all. Look, ideology was woven throughout all of that, and
Yeah, it
once
was. It was.
again, it was not intentional, y'all. We just try to
No.
give you good language that you can't unhear and apply everywhere. So. All right, Dr. Lisa, this is it. Let's wrap up this episode of Unfazed, Unedited. Of course, you all know that you can reach us on pretty much any social media platform or podcast app that you might use at Unfazed, Unedited. You can email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com or just visit our website and find everything there, unfazedpodcast.com, our old and new shows. So if you liked this week's episode, please share it, like it, leave a review, share with friends, coworkers, or others in this phase of your life. So, Dr. Lisa, till next time.
All right. See you next week.